You're listening to Let Me Tell You Why You're Wrong, all on Georgia Radio Network.
From the secret tunnels underneath Paulding County, this is episode 86 of the Let Me Tell You Why You're Wrong podcast. I'm Dave Roberts. And joining us from Cell Block D of Facebook jail, journalist Jessica Szilagyi.
Hey, I'm so glad they let me out to do this.
Work release.
Yes. That's what you want to call it.
So, what did you do?
I honestly don't know. I mean, I know, but I don't know for the specifics. So, a week and a half ago now, when this publishes, I was headed to a meeting and I tried to post something on my way out the door, and it was like, you can't, option failed, and so I just let it go and thought that was kind of odd, and I was able to post something that didn't have a link, and so I just thought that maybe there was something going on with the links. And when I got home that evening, it said that I was banned from sharing links for 7 days. And when I logged in on a computer, it takes you to the community standards page, and it just had the All on Georgia link, like the text box of a link, and it had that link as what was flagged. I don't know what article specifically, but it showed the hyperlink, and then I was banned from sharing links on my personal page. All of the All on Georgia pages, I couldn't share them in any groups. Can't comment them in any comment section. Can't even send them in Messenger. Can't send them to myself. Can't share a video from someone else's page. Nothing. Total shutdown, but I can share photos and of my own and post just text. But for me, the first full week of the month is the busiest week of my month for local government and everything, and it was killing me to not be able to publish my articles for people to see, because even when I created some alternative accounts, they shut those down too.
Yeah, you have to wonder who complained. I mean, was it the algorithm that got you? I don't think so. I don't think the algorithms are reading the articles.
No, because if it was, first of all, there's more than just me sharing All on Georgia links on a daily basis. Yeah, I get on all the pages and I have to schedule a bunch of articles, but there are other people who do that too, and they weren't flagged. Second, on every page, All on Georgia official page that I'm on, there are at least 2 other people on them, and none of them were flagged. And I'm sure I know that it came from my personal profile, because otherwise they would have just locked the individual page, and it was just my personal page. So I know someone had to have reported it. But my thing is, and I've said it on this show before, I am so reliant on Facebook. I would have no problem paying a monthly user fee to have an upgraded account or an elevated account or whatever, so that I couldn't get reported for this kind of stuff, because I am not sharing Alex Jones type stuff. I mean, it's not like I'm out. I don't even mostly talk about national politics. It's all very focused and laser on local and state government. So it was somebody who was feeling a little weak, a little bit like a pansy. Go ahead and report this podcast too. That's fine.
Yeah, has to be somebody. You've already gotten the comments on your stuff about if you didn't report corruption, there wouldn't be any.
Yeah.
So it had to be something like that. But I don't, and I've said on this show before, I don't know when Facebook becomes a publisher, a utility, and I don't know. There's a guy running for office in Georgia District 1 that was thrown off of Twitter.
Yes.
Said for having multiple accounts or something like that. And it's yeah, I've got a campaign account, which as we've discussed before, you can't, if you discussed government issues, campaign issues on your personal page, you can't ban anybody from that page. So politicians should have 2 pages, one to share cat videos and what their kids are doing, and one for constituents to discuss things and upcoming legislation. And honestly, if they want to vent at their lawmaker, by all means, do it.
Yeah, I think most people support having that divide too. I mean, people understand what social media is, and that in a lot of ways it's for people to connect. So I don't have a problem with an elected official having a personal account that's their family and their friends and the people they actually enjoy interacting with. I think that's ridiculous that, and the congressional candidate, he's challenging an incumbent, Buddy Carter, and he also is the co-founder of Nine Line Apparel. And I don't know if that had anything to do with it, but I would imagine that it was not helpful to his case. And it's frustrating because I know I'm not the only one. I'm happy to follow the rules, but if I break a rule, I do feel like I don't want government regulation. Even after all of this, I still don't want, this smackdown from Congress on social media. However, I do think that Facebook has an obligation to tell you specifically what rule you broke. Like, tell me exactly what was wrong with whatever I did to be justified in not using it. I mean, if you get kicked out of a bar, they're going to tell you what you did to get kicked out of the bar.
Yeah, and I know somebody who does semi-permanent, permanent makeup. And one of the things she does is nipple tattooing for women who've had mastectomies. It's a 3D tattoo, and according to Facebook standards, if it's medical like that, they can show it. It's not considered nudity. So she would put up videos or pictures of before and after and the process that goes through, and it's a reconstructive process. It gets flagged every time. They shut her down. She now has a form letter that she goes in, fires it off. She's cuts and pastes, fire it off. And 6 hours later, she's back up, or whatever the time frame is. But Facebook has got an agenda, and Twitter, the stuff that Twitter allows, and then shut this guy down saying you can't have multiple accounts. Like, well, yes, you can. Nine Line Apparel can have an account. I can have an account, and my campaign should have an account. In fact, your campaign manager or your social media manager probably manages that Twitter account. At least that's how we did it in the campaign that I worked on. Was the campaign Facebook stuff was a committee of things to put stuff out and schedule, and then you have your personal Facebook page, which you share cat videos and things like that. But good news is, by the time this episode drops, you will be paroled.
I will, and we are. That's one of the reasons that I started the newsletter. I think we mentioned on here, but just because Facebook picks and chooses what gets traction and what doesn't, and it's one of the reasons that we're, working on a independent app so that you can get. Not everybody reads it through Facebook, but there's a heavy mobile presence on news in general, and so if it's on your phone and you have a direct app, we don't have to go through Facebook in the same way, but. It's been really hard. I feel like I've been silenced for sure. Not to be dramatic, but like what good is going to all this government crap if I can't tell anyone about it?
What the people that they're punishing are the folks that are being served or underserved by these local governments.
Right.
As much as I enjoy reading about Brooklet, it doesn't directly affect me. But the people of Brooklet are now have been cut off from that information. Other than that, there's other ways of getting it. So I don't know what the answer is on that. You're right. Onerous congressional action on it is probably not the way to go. But I don't know of a free market solution to it.
No, neither.
Well, following up, real quick, we talked a couple episodes back about the Miami Airbnb ban and the fines, the $100,000 fines for Airbnb rentals.
Ugh. Well, punishment doesn't fit the crime. Little bit.
Yeah, renting my house. So anyway, a judge ruled, a court rules that those fines are illegal.
Yay!
So good guys win one. And on the other side, we spoke about Narda Conkle, who was running for mayor of the city of Dallas. The election board found that she did not meet residency requirements. No judge out here would touch it. So it went to Cobb County, and the judge threw it out. She is no longer. She will not be a valid option on the ballot, and Boyd Austin will run unopposed. We do have some good stuff coming up on the show. A couple segments down, we've got an interview with the director of the Paulding County Airport, and some really interesting information that he has on it, and the good things that are going out here. But on the spirit of the show, let's talk about some BS. Oxnard, California is giving citizens, air quotes, free trees.
Boo.
The city of Oxnard. Go ahead.
I was really hoping that this was going to be about a town that was maybe like 2,500 people or something, so that, it wasn't going to be this ridiculous expense. But I'll let you give the summary. But just keep in mind, as we're talking about this, that they have 210,000 people and 51,000 households in this city. I think it's just outside of LA.
Yeah, they've opened an application process for residents to apply to have a lime, lemon, peach, orange, or avocado tree planted, quote unquote, for free in their front yards in an effort to curb greenhouse gas emissions. And as you said, Jessica, 51,000 households in this suburb.
And sure, I'm sure they have apartments and some townhomes, but I mean, you can plant those things in raised boxes, so those people, everyone is eligible. And then I know that not everybody will do it. I would not take a government tree, and I would not take government lemons. But if you are conservative, I mean, I didn't know that when we put this on our outline for this week, I did not know that Sandy Springs in Georgia is doing this as well. And they had set aside, they'd capped it at $50,000, but their trees were like $150 to $250 per tree that they're offering for free, I guess. I gave a conservative estimate, if you Google lemon trees and stuff when they're babies, to $16 to $75, which brings you at $400,000 if half the residents do it. If you get these fancy trees, which I'm sure they're not going to skimp on them, or already developed trees because they're trying to combat greenhouse gas emissions, you're talking $1 million easily in trees.
Oh yeah, and that money's going directly to the city.
And let's not forget, I mean, California is a concrete jungle, especially LA, because they made it one. You cut down all the trees to develop, and now you want to put the trees back? I don't know. And why these trees?
Specifically, why these trees? I was kind of wondering that myself. If there's a scientific reason to say that an avocado tree processes twice the amount of CO2 per square foot than a pine tree does, whatever. Or is it because they're pretty trees? I don't know. I don't know why these trees specifically, other than possibly they're wanting to encourage people to grow food so that the homeless people have something to pick and eat.
I thought about that element of it, which I feel like in my libertarian soulless opinion makes it even worse. I mean, I just don't understand I don't like incentives either. I don't like tax breaks, but I'd be more comfortable with, hey, if you submit your 2 trees that you kept alive for 6 months on your tax bill, then we'll give you a little rollback. At least there's no, this is just the cost of the tree. You're not talking about who's going to plant it.
Who's going to clean up after it?
Who's going to drop it off? Well, in Sandy Springs, once the tree is planted, you're responsible for keeping it alive.
Yeah, but who's going to clean up after it? Fruit trees.
They're a mess.
And I grew up with a kumquat, an orange, and a grapefruit tree in my backyard. But it was, it wasn't a lot of work. But yeah, you had to make sure you pick the fruit up off the ground because it would sit there and rot and get bugs and all that stuff. So you've got avocado trees dropping large, heavy fruit in the driveways, and I would say front yard. I'm imagining hanging over the road and things like that. You've got a mess. Now, whatever happened to neighborhoods? Like, again, when I grew up, we did luminaries on Christmas Eve. Everybody would get sand, get like lunch sacks, and put candles in them, and we'd light those up, and then everybody kind of go out and talk in the neighborhood. But it was organized by the neighborhood. So why couldn't individual neighborhoods say, hey, listen, I'm going to have to put an orange tree out, you put a lemon tree out, Bob down the street put a whatever tree out, and let's make this do this for our neighborhood. The impact of a single city on CO2 emissions is, first, stupid.
Right.
If you want to address CO2 emissions, you have to go to China. The world's, I think, single leading polluter, air, CO2, because they have no EPA and they have no desire to have an EPA, which is why it's cheaper to produce things there. It's a feel-good thing. I don't know. I think somewhere in a back room they went into executive session and said, how can we tax people without making them think it's a tax?
Well, and this is supposed to be a rebuke of Trump and his rollbacks and everything, but I don't know about California, but I know that a lot of communities, even our very small towns down here, have committees and keep Bullitt County beautiful, organizations that get grants and all kinds of things. They plant trees. They are, Statesboro is like one of the Tree City USA cities where outside of the city government, the community unites to plant trees every year. And there's downtown groups that put plants and planters and trees and landscaping, all kinds of greenery in all the time. Why does this have to be a city initiative?
Because they know better than you, peasant.
Well, thank God for them.
So, what's wrong with moving a polling location to a police station?
Do you have a problem with this?
No.
So, the city of Jonesboro, I missed this story when I guess it's been news. I guess it happened in September, but I missed it completely. But the city of Jonesboro, which is south of Atlanta on 75, 85, if you've gone that way, 75, I believe, has moved the polling location to the police station because the old location, which was the firehouse, which had been converted into a museum, was under construction. And so now the Root and Huffington Post and civil rights groups are saying that the city is trying to intimidate voters by putting the polling location at the police station. And I'm trying to figure out why a government building is a problem for a voting location. Not every place is a metro area. We have, I vote in like a hut. It's like a 12 by 12 room in the middle of nowhere that is impressive that it has power. And it's not owned by the government. It's I believe, part of a church. And people get upset that we vote in churches. They get upset that we vote in schools. They get upset about everything. So you have this in a government building that doesn't cost you anything else. And now you're saying it's too intimidating just merely having them there?
Right. And the thing about the schools is it is disruptive to the school.
That's absolutely right. Especially with the security standards that they've put in place now in our state.
Right. And I think they've moved my polling place, I haven't checked, out of a church, and it's a mega church out here. And it's not like, I even think they went through the trouble of like not having a bunch of religious stuff out. It's not in the sanctuary. It's on one of the outbuildings, but still, people are still upset about having to go to a church. And so you move it to a. And this is not even a permanent move. The building that they were voting in is under construction. And they said, well, where do we have space? I'll just do it at the police station. And who's intimidated?
Listen to this, because this is what really irritates me. And I'm a supporter of the ACLU because they get it wrong a lot, but they get it right more than they get it wrong. And they have been great advocates against opponents of legislation in Georgia in the past couple years. But in their letter to the city and to the county, because I guess I misspoke, the county is partly responsible for assigning the voting location because they have a board of elections, but it says, in this country's not so distant past, law enforcement officers harassed, arrested, and beat black people for trying to vote. Okay, got a couple problems here. One, that is still the past. Like, when was the last time you heard of anybody being beaten trying to vote? Second, are you really only advocating that this is intimidating to black people? Because if it's intimidating, like, hold the phone. Does Jonesboro not have any black officers? I'm just baffled that that is the tone. It's not only race, but violence.
You're talking about something that 70 years ago, just about 60, 70 years ago, and not excusing it, but to say that is that's going to suppress the votes. If your dedication to casting your ballot is so weak that you won't walk into a building where there might be a cop, don't vote. You obviously don't care that much.
Well, where else are you not going? Because
right,
there's cops everywhere.
I would crawl across broken glass to cast my ballot. Now, I understand. Says the white guy. I'll go to a police station. Doesn't bother me at all. They're all so polite. Give me warnings. It's great. So I understand the perception there, but I really think, and to further your point, is it's insulting to people of color to say that they're going to be too frightened to go vote because it's at a police station. I mean, what does that say? What does that say about your confidence in people, and that people are so fragile that we've got to have a special polling place to make sure that persons of color aren't intimidated by a police officer? I mean, hell,
I don't know.
Jonesboro, don't go outside. There are cops everywhere. I've had like 3 tickets in Jonesboro. There are plenty of cops.
They're also forgetting too that your county, I mean, your poll workers are local people. Like, do you really have such little trust in your community that you think you're going to be intimidated away from voting?
Did you read this quote? Forcing voters to cast their ballots under the steely gaze of armed law enforcement officers all but amounts to government-sponsored voter intimidation.
Yeah. Okay. Sure.
Yeah.
In this Huffington Post article, which is a terrible place to get your news, but that's the... I plan to write about this on All in Georgia, but I don't really know how at this point. But it says, this is not a quote. This is just the Huffington Post, quote, reporting. Choosing the police station as a polling location is particularly alarming because of the relationship between law enforcement and African Americans, who make up more than 60% of the Jonesboro population. They noted that the city's police chief resigned last year amid controversy over the department's treatment of a Black Lives Matter protester. They also pointed out that the county had an ordinance that inflicted a heavy fine for a trivial offense, allowing law enforcement to fine up to $480 for sagging pants. Okay? Again, the sagging pants thing, I'm totally against those ordinances, but they're all over the place and they're unconstitutional. Someone just has to challenge them. But again, are you saying that only that are you really saying that a community that is 60% black is going to put its own community in a position where it doesn't think the people can turn out to vote?
No, absolutely. And
this is behind, Stacey Abrams is behind this as well.
Of course she is.
Well, the New Georgia Project, I mean, that's her initiative. I don't know how involved she is in that today with her other fair whatever election crap, but that is her initial nonsense.
And, it's just a government building. It's just a building. They're not saying you have to go into a jail cell. They're just using the building to go use the machines. It has to be a secure. It doesn't have to be a secure building, but polling places are places you can't carry guns and stuff like that. You don't want it at a school. You don't want it at a church, and really should not be in an active firehouse because every once in a while there's a fire and these trucks need to be able to roll quickly. And I'm not knowing the layout of everything individually, but it can be disruptive to fire operations. I don't know. I don't see a problem with it. Certainly not enough to make the HuffPo and the make national news for Abrams to be losing her mind and yelling at voter suppression. I think she's grasping at straws. She makes her money by making people afraid. Mm-hmm. She is turning into a race pimp. As got to keep scared. Got to keep them scared. Got to keep them scared. I'm here to protect you. And if people stop being scared, start getting along, it does nothing but hurt the politicians. So that's on both sides. But she went from being a semi-reasonable person to an activist. And this is what's lining her pockets, not just the Harlequin novel she writes. Which is interesting for somebody who writes a lot of fiction.
Me or her?
Her. No,
oh.
you.
That's my fake news?
You and your fake news sitting in Facebook prison.
Mm-hmm.
So, moving on. And in our continuing effort to cover some good news in our community spotlight, we have with us the director of the Paulding County Airport, Terry Tibbetts. Mr. Tibbetts is a Paulding County native, a multi-generational Paulding County native, licensed pilot, airplane mechanic who's federally certified to inspect aircraft. He earned a bachelor's degree and master's degree in electrical engineering from Georgia Tech and worked a long-time career as a research engineer at Tech. He was responsible for development of a radar warning system installed in 2,000 military aircraft worldwide. Terry, we're really happy to have you with us.
Thank you. Glad to be here.
When did you take over as the airport director?
I took over in May of 2016.
And in that time, just as a casual observer, I visited the airport before that and took a tour of the facility. It's a beautiful building, but it was empty.
It was close to empty, that is correct.
I think there was a car parked in one of the hangars.
Okay.
So I visited you this morning, and I saw a $50 million toy parked outside your window.
Yes, it's a Gulfstream G650. It's one of the largest corporate jets made.
And that's your personal aircraft, right?
I wish. That actually belongs to a tenant that's based here now.
Outstanding. And tell us a little bit about some of the programs you have going on. I know you had a program for kids this summer.
Well, let me tell you about our recent past and our plans for the future, if that's okay.
Oh, please do.
Okay, so we have a strategic plan for the airport, and that strategic plan includes, as a very important component, the education of the next generation of aviators. So we are now putting a lot of emphasis on any kind of training program, any kind of teaming that we can do with the local schools and colleges, and the FAA and other aviation organizations. So this past summer, the FAA has a program that they call ACE Summer Camp. And it's basically a summer camp for next generation mechanics for the FAA or for the aviation industry. And we are one of the few airports in the country that are hosting these right now. And it was a week-long program targeting high school students, and we had about 50 local high school students, juniors and seniors primarily, who were able to participate in an all-day program for 5 days where they were exposed to all kinds of aviation topics. We had antique aircraft that flew in, we had military aircraft that flew in, we had maintenance demonstrations. They were able to do some hands-on work, wire wrapping and or safety wiring rather, and they did some drilling and riveting and things of that sort. So they got an exposure to what being a mechanic would be like. Then a couple of weeks after that, one of the local colleges hosted an elementary school STEM camp. So these were kids, kindergarten through 5th grade, I believe it was, and they did Lego robots and those kind of things, and they used our facility to host about 50 elementary school kids, so that was exciting. Then this fall, after school started back, we had our annual STEM program where we provide a location for the Paulding County Department of Education to come in and bring in high school students for their STEM activity. And we were able to host about 650 high school kids who came in and were exposed to aviation topics, first responder topics. We had Delta Airlines participated in that with what amounts to a job fair to try to get kids interested more globally in topics related to STEM, science, technology, engineering, and mathematics, but with a focus on aviation, of course, since it is here at the airport. So those are some of the things that we've done in the very recent past. Looking ahead, we have an aviation museum that is looking for a new home, and we are working very hard to try to make this their new home. And we hope to be able to make an official announcement on that in the near future, that we've inked a deal with them that will bring antique aircraft restoration projects, special events and training, and an actual live hands-on museum that people who are interested in aviation history can enjoy. Governor Deal came out in December of last year and announced a program with Chattahoochee Tech where they're trying to bring a new aviation maintenance school here. It's going to be called the Aviation Academy, which will be housed in Chattahoochee Tech and is targeted to train as many as 100 students per year. And they will come out of that program as licensed mechanics, and they would then be suitable for employment by the aviation industry in Georgia and elsewhere. So we're real excited about all of those things moving forward, and just happy to see this airport getting a lot of use. This past year, we had over 10,000 people pass through the terminal building here. Most of those were non-aviation visitors. So we host public meetings, government meetings. You can rent the facility for private activities like weddings, birthday parties, corporate events. It's just a beautiful facility here, and it is available for the public. And we're happy to be able to work with the public to provide what amounts to a small convention center here. And along the lines of a convention center, we are attempting to convert our office building that was never finished on the side of our big corporate hangar to what we're now calling the West Paulding Conference Center, which will give us a 5,000 square foot meeting room upstairs overlooking the airfield and this beautiful area surrounding the airport, which is the Paulding Forest. So a very long answer to a short question.
I think my favorite part about all of that is the aviation school and having people come out as mechanics, because for a number of reasons. First, that there's obviously a need and a demand for that, but also just, I guess, propping up the industry as a whole with the totality of what you're doing, because I think there's still some, like, it's not cool still to go into some of those industries. There's still these expectations from our schools, our traditional schools, to send people to four-year institutions and to put them on a certain track. And there's such a need for technical and skilled labor. And so I love that you guys are doing that.
You're exactly right. The thing that we face in the aviation industry is that aviation peaked in this country in the mid-'70s. And after the mid-'70s, the average age of pilots, mechanics, air traffic controllers, virtually everybody in the industry began to increase. And now here we are in 2019, and the average age of a pilot is 50 plus years old. The average age of a mechanic is the same, the average age of an air traffic controller. And what that means is, in 10 years, this population is going to be aging out, and we're not replacing our pilots, our mechanics, our air traffic controllers, our business leaders in the aviation community fast enough. And people in the aviation industry have begun to recognize that we have a real demographics issue. And so people like us are beginning to put a lot of emphasis on educating the next generation. And we want to make this airport a center of excellence for that, so that we can participate in the growing of the next generation of aviators.
Well, that's across the board. As somebody who works in a trade, the labor shortage. Sometime in the 70s and 80s, the emphasis on education went from learning a trade to you have to go to school, college prep, and it was your guidance counselor would almost threaten you with, if you don't study hard, you're going to get a job with a name on your shirt. And as the son of a Delta mechanic who did pretty well with his name on his shirt, working his way up into corporate, and now is a Charles Taylor Award winner, which is 50 years in aviation. It's sad to see that we've got kids that are, and we covered this on some of our education shows with student loans, walking out of school with $100,000 in loan debt and no job prospects.
You're exactly right. And I know it's not unique to the aviation industry, but the aviation industry is hit particularly hard by this demographic shift, because all of the trades related to aviation do require a lot of specialized training. And one of the sources of that training has historically been the military. And so we have seen a decrease in the size of the military in this country, particularly after the Vietnam War completed. There was a sizable downshift in the percentage of the population who went into the military. And, a lot of these trades in the military have, like everything, become more automated. And so the people coming out of the military with these special skills is not the same percentage of the general population that it was 20, 30, 40 years ago. You look back to World War II, practically every able-bodied male over the age of 18 went to war. And that entire population came out with skills, many of which were very well suited to the aviation industry in particular. And since that time, that percentage has been on a steady decline. So now, a generation later, we're faced with some real challenges in this industry to keep all of our planes flying, all of our cockpits occupied and all of our control towers manned. So education is going to be the key to turning that demographic issue around.
Besides the social stigmas, or just whether that be from the inside of the educational systems or on the outside, what are the biggest hurdles in getting what you need in terms of skilled labor?
I really think that part of the problem is aviation is just not as cool as it was when I was a kid. You know, when I was in high school in the early 70s, I had lots of friends who were taking flying lessons at the time. And if you wanted to get a good date with a pretty girl, you became a private pilot. And, you know, they thought that was cool. Today, it doesn't have quite the degree of coolness that it did back then. So there's just an attitude shift, I think, amongst kids these days, that there are, you know, IT is a big thing. IT didn't exist in the 70s. And today, IT is a big draw for kids coming out of high school. They're high-paying jobs, they're good jobs, and those kinds of careers compete with aviation careers to draw away some of the best and brightest students that a generation ago might have gone to aviation. So there are a lot of challenges that we face in this industry.
What kinds of assistance are you getting from, and I don't just mean like financial, but in terms of support services, are you getting from local, state, and the feds at this point?
We get outstanding support at all of those levels now. We've got a very positive pro-aviation board of commissioners in Paulding County now that have begun to really work well with us. Georgia DOT operates your general aviation airports in Georgia. When I say operate, they manage the grant funding in what's called a block grant basis. So the FAA doesn't manage your day-to-day grant activity at your smaller airports like us. They hand that off to Georgia DOT. And so most of my interfaces on the aviation side are through the aviation department of Georgia DOT, and we get outstanding support. And when I do need something from the FAA, they have been very good to work with us. They're, of course, very pro-airport, and they're interested in the programs that we're beginning to start out here. It was the FAA who hosted this ACE Academy, this high school camp that we had. And so they have been very involved out here, and I couldn't ask for better support than what we're getting now. And let me throw out a positive thing about our elected state delegation. Our representatives and our senators that serve the Paulding County area, they have been very instrumental in keeping the funding in place for this aviation academy for Chattahoochee Tech. And they recently traveled as a group to Washington, D.C., and along with Representative Tom Graves, who's our Washington representative for this area, they traveled over to one of the senior officials over in the FAA to see what they could do to help support getting this aviation academy located here. So we are really getting good support on the political side, the governmental side, state and local agencies. I just couldn't be more pleased with the cooperation that we're getting now.
And oddly enough, I believe that was Martin Mumtahan's first time on an airplane.
Is that right? Okay. Martin's a young guy. He's serving his first term in the State House, and he has made many trips out here to the airport. I have sat down and talked with him and Joseph Gullett and others on numerous occasions, and their question is almost always the same: How can we help you? So yeah, Martin's doing a great job. Joseph and Senator Dugan, all of these guys, Senator Bill Heath, they are all just outstanding to work with, and I couldn't be happier to have them on board.
And we're kind of running along, but real quick, do you have an idea of how many students they're looking to have when the academy's finished?
Well, when it's fully up and operational, my understanding is they're targeting an annual graduation class of about 100. So somewhere between 50 and 100 a year.
Awesome.
Well, Terry, I certainly appreciate you coming on and letting us know about the good stuff that's going on out there.
Well, let me throw one final shout out to our local flight school that's here, Flying Tigers. If anyone in the community wants to come out and take an introductory flight, you can come out and for a very modest fee, you can go up in a plane for 20 or 30 minutes and see if it's for you. And we'd love to see more pilots being trained out here, and anybody can come out and get a tour of the terminal building and our facilities here at any time. So thank you for the interview, and we're always happy to work with the community.
And I did forget to mention we now have a charter service flying out of Paulding County.
That's correct.
I actually looked at it for the Atlanta Gator Club to be able to go fly down to Gainesville, go to a game, and fly back the same day. And it's fairly reasonable to do that and not have to drive 6 hours each way and get a hotel and deal with all that. You can fly in, tailgate, party, fly back, and be home that night.
That's right, and they fly when you want to fly. You schedule your time of departure with them, and they'll take you anywhere you want to go.
So for those of us who aren't quite at the $50 million jet level, you can get a private flight and have a quick commute somewhere.
That's
Terry,
correct.
Where can anybody get a hold of you to schedule a tour?
Just call the office here. We have a website, the Paulding Airport website. And just dial the number for the main office. Miss Yolanda Newell will be happy to set that up, and we do tours all the time.
Great. Well, thank you very much for coming on and sharing that information with us.
Thank y'all. I appreciate it.
Now that we've had some good news, let's get back into stuff that makes you angry. Former officer in Kingsland, Georgia, found not guilty on both voluntary and involuntary manslaughter charges following an officer-involved shooting in June 2018.
You want me to explain this one?
Please.
Okay. So this is a little bit closer to me than it is to Dave. Did you guys hear about this story up there? Like when it was happening?
Not that I recall, but my memory's not great.
And this, Amber Geiger's story and trial and everything really dominated the headlines, but his trial... Officer Zechariah Presley, his trial was actually happening at the same time, and I think her verdict was early in the week, and her sentence was on maybe Wednesday or Thursday, and he was sentenced on Saturday, or convicted on Saturday. So anyway, it was very close together. But basically, in June 2018, he worked for the Kingsland Police Department. There was a confrontation. A man named Tony Green ended up dead. The GBI, he was fired from the police department, but they didn't really release why because everything was under investigation. And the GBI initially said that that Tony Green was shot in the back as he was fleeing, and there were a lot of conflicting reports, and as it came out in the trial, it appeared that the officer justified it by saying that he was reaching for something. He was turning around, like the man was turning around, and he thought he was going to reach for something and turn back around and shoot him, and that's why he fired. And he was fleeing. He was running from the police for, I can't remember. I don't want to speak incorrectly on the specifics of the traffic stop because I don't want to get people caught up in all of that. However, the man did die, and he was fired from his job and charged with voluntary manslaughter, involuntary manslaughter, and violation of oath of office. And the jury found him not guilty on both of the manslaughter charges, but found him guilty on the charge of a violation of oath of office. And that's a felony charge that holds a sentence of 1 to 5 years. And this is... So I was out actually having like a personal life on Saturday when this verdict came out, and someone messaged me and told me what it was. They're like, didn't you cover this case? And they told me what the conviction was, and I'm like, oh my gosh, no, that's so wrong. The jury totally got it wrong. This is going to get overturned in court because the book that I have mentioned that I'm writing is almost identical to this, except that the person convicted was not a police officer. It was a city official. But the violation of oath of office charge in Georgia was created as kind of a sentence enhancer, similar to hate crime. So the legislature wanted to make crimes against the public especially egregious. So, if you stole money, then you were also charged with a violation of oath of office, because you might get a misdemeanor conviction for the theft, but a felony ensures that it carries with you forever and that you actually serve prison time. So the idea was that you were found guilty of a crime, and then it was enhanced with the violation of oath of office sentence of 1 to 5 years in prison. But if you were not found guilty of a crime, you could not be found guilty of a violation of oath of office, because the violation of oath of office was that you committed a crime in your official duties. So by that logic, if he's found not guilty on the manslaughter charges, there's supposed to be a directed verdict by the judge, or if the jury has not, found him not guilty on their own, the judge is supposed to say, hold up, okay, if he's not guilty of these criminal charges, therefore he cannot be convicted of the violation of oath of office. People get all kinds of confused because juries are dumb, and sometimes they feel like they can't meet the threshold for the crimes that they were charged with, but they feel like they need to do something. And so they use this charge to throw the book at someone and, send them away for a year or two. And then when it's appealed, it gets overturned. It's been overturned over and over and over again in our own state courts through the Court of Appeals, with police officers, with elected officials, going back to 1993. They have said that a criminal act has to be, like, a guilty charge on a criminal act has to occur for the violation of oath of office to stand. People think, oh, well, no, they just stood up there, they put their hand on the Bible, they swore on an oath. And that's not what we're talking about, because that is not a legal binding document. That is a moral and an ethical standard. And so I have no doubt that this is going to be challenged, and I think he'll be successful in getting the conviction vacated.
And I shared this story on my Facebook page, and I actually had one of the, state lawmakers comment on it. This is surprising to everyone, that you can hit somebody with a charge this charge is like a second story on a house. If the first story, which is the manslaughter and the murder charges, don't exist, if there's no first story, you can't put a second story on there. There's no foundation. So there's attempting to elevate the charges with the violation of oath of office doesn't make sense. And you're right, juries are not legal scholars. And when presented with 3 charges like that, you're right, they're sitting around the jury room talking it out, and they say, well, we don't have enough to convict. And in the story, this guy had been on top of the officer, grabbing at his gun, grabbing at his taser. There had been a physical struggle with this guy. I mean, he wasn't a sweetheart. He wasn't armed, but you not be able to tell that at night. Not getting into the nuts and bolts of that case, but there wasn't enough to convict on it. Therefore, there's no first story. There's no foundation. We can't put the roof on.
That's right. And, understandably, the family is outraged. And I honestly don't think the family of Tony Green is outraged, but I don't think that the stuff leading up to the case was handled properly. I think there were some procedural issues with bond and things like that, which gives the family the impression that the system is not fair or just or whatever the case may be. So I do understand their concerns there, but they much like we see in a lot of places, they're upset about the verdict because they want someone held accountable because their loved one is dead. But as I tried to explain in my column, the facts of the case no longer matter. I mean, they matter to people, and they matter from a humanity standpoint, and the fact that this family no longer has their loved one, and this ex-officer now has to deal with the fact that he took someone's life and all of that. But in terms of the legal system, it does not matter. The facts of the case do not matter. He will not be charged for those crimes again. And so you have to look at the law and what it is and what it was supposed to do. And this is so frequently abused that, I mean, I'm giving some serious spoilers here, but that's the point of my book, is to articulate that the legislature needs to amend this to make it a conditional charge. And if there is no guilty verdict related to the charge, whether it's a misdemeanor or a felony, I don't really care. But if there is no criminal charge, you cannot move forward with this, no matter what. Because if somebody is not guilty of a crime, you can't just put them in prison because you think they did something unethical or immoral. That is not how our system is set up. And again, it's funny that like the irony of the fact that I write about this in this book that I'm writing and in this story, and I'm defending people who, you know, may have done something wrong, just speaks to how badly it's being abused. Because I would support, if this bill was being drafted today, I would support it because it sounds like a great idea to enhance sentences on people who have violated the public trust. But if they are found not guilty, it doesn't matter if they did it or not. The court of law found them not guilty, and we don't just throw the book at people because we think they should be held accountable, even if the law says they shouldn't.
Right, and as a sentence enhancer, that's one thing. I don't. Police officers are citizens. Now, holding them to a different standard as far as when to shoot and things like that, like we talked about with the case last week, is one thing. But and using that in sentencing is something that we should be doing. But having it as a separate charge, someone needs to, and there will be no appetite to do this, but someone at the Capitol needs to restructure that law.
Right.
And as soon as they do, you'll hear the sound of you're weak on crime, or you hate minorities, and trying to take these charges away from cops. You're allowing cops to have open hunting season on citizens, and those little chirps will add up, and it'll just not go anywhere.
I hope not. I mean, it really is a simple fix. It's one of those things that I almost hope would just like soar through, attached to something else, because it's so important. I mean, the judge in the case that I am writing my story on has sentenced almost every person who has been found guilty or not guilty, or whatever the case. She has been the judge on all the cases relating to violation of oath of office over the last 20 years. And she's thrown the book at every single one of them. And it's just, one, it's wrong, but two, it teaches the public the wrong purpose for the laws and the justice system, and two, that we have some ethical obligation to hold people accountable legally for things that we don't agree with. Someone's found not guilty of theft, and we say, well, I don't like how they managed the money, though, but it wasn't illegal, but we're still going to put him in prison? Really? What if we did that to private individuals in private setting? That would not fly. When
Right.
that happens in the private industry, they're just fired.
Yeah, and there's a very high standard to recall for that very reason. With local elections, there has to be a crime. There are high standards to that sort of violating the public trust. And if, in the way the law is written, if you didn't break the law, you could not have violated the public trust. I mean, it's your if-then scenario. So, yeah, it would be lovely to see them take that up. So, be sure to call your state reps hourly.
Yes. Do it.
Do it. Jessica, do you have any closing thoughts?
I do. I you know, we did have a couple positive stories this week, which I think was nice. But I have one other one that just shows the power of exposure and why it's so important to go to government meetings and the power of the media. Because a couple weeks ago, there was a called meeting in Screven County, which is adjoining to my county, and they were there for something else, but the sheriff was present, and he out of nowhere stood up and said that he would like the commissioners to go ahead and draft an ordinance banning guns on rec department property because there had been some people open carrying at the park. I guess they had rifles, I don't know, but that's what he said. But there had not been no one had been hurt, but the sheriff just didn't want that. And I'm sitting there knowing that that's totally illegal, that Georgia has a preemptive clause that doesn't allow locals to make gun laws that are more strict than the state laws, but I just let them go, and the commissioner's like, yes, we want to do that immediately. We're going to have the attorney draft an ordinance immediately, and we're going to have it take effect conditionally. Like, as soon as the attorney, we'll vote to have the attorney drafted, and as soon as he's drafted it, it will take effect, even though we haven't read it. Like, they literally said they were going to do that. Upon drafting, it would take effect. They wouldn't even have to come back to vote. So anyway, I wrote about it. I let my friends at Georgia Carry know. I just informed the people that I know that are gun proponents and 2A proponents, and a lot of them reached out to the Screven County commissioners. The article made the sheriff look pretty bad, I'm not gonna lie, but I didn't blast him. I just wrote the laws, and he clearly doesn't know the laws. And they had a meeting this week, and that is dead in the water. It's not going anywhere, and it was swift because people were there to see it. Had it not been, it would have taken effect without anybody knowing, had no one been there. I mean, it wasn't in the newspaper, nothing. Had I not been there, had the people that brought me in, had they not been there, they'd have gun restrictions, and then we'd have to go to court.
Oh, yeah, somebody would have been arrested, and then it would have been a thing.
Right.
Yeah.
So go to your meetings.
Be loud, be obnoxious, make sure they know who you are.
Email them every hour.
Congratulations to the Lowe family. Matt's oldest swore into the Air Force last week, which is really good for him. He has a direction now that he's out of high school. He has a career path ahead of him. And even better for Matt, 1 down, 6 to go. So, thanks for hanging in with us. Thank you to Terry Tibbetts for joining us. For Jessica Szilagyi, I'm Dave Roberts. Have a great week.